All right, there we go. We are live. Hey, good day, everyone. And I'm your host, Jeff Freeman, and welcome to the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live show. Today, I have the honor to be joined by three very, very distinguished guests. Uh, I got to turn this off real quick. There we go. Today, we have Miss Gretchen Cornwall with us, Mr. Wayne Murphy, and Mr. Shawn Williamson. Welcome to you three. I would also like to reach out and just say thank you to our admin, Linda Simpson, who helps put all of this stuff together. My co-host, Jack Campbell, who can't be with us on screen tonight, but he's out there in the chat. And also to Jan Anderson, who does our synopsis and such. Thank you so much, you guys, for helping out. I'd like to go and do a little bit of a further introduction and start with Miss Gretchen Cornwall. Now, you are an author and also historian and a singer-songwriter, right? Is that correct?
Yes, I do enjoy the creative arts, but I'm also keenly interested in history. Mm-hmm. And in song, I realize that I love to tell stories, and often folk songs are laced with historical events. And the Templars grabbed my attention in the mid-90s, and I just couldn't put the subject down, and I kept pursuing it. And then I finally realized I wanted to write about it, speak about it, and travel and find out as much as I could. And I was blessed to live in the UK for almost 20 years now. But it's a privilege to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad you're here. Mr. Wayne Murphy, now you've got quite a background as well. You've been in law enforcement for quite a few years. Is that correct?
I started, I got about 30 years in. I started off as a federal game warden, and I also worked for the sheriff's department. Mm-hmm. And then in the 1980, I joined the Milwaukee Police Department, where I spent 25 years. Wow. After I retired, I took some various other jobs, transportation coordinator for a local county, something that I've never done before, but I wanted to try. Mm-hmm. And then I took a job with the state as a welfare fraud investigator, and also with the Department of Corrections for violent sexual offenders.
Oh, wow.
And so I've been involved in investigations of major scales for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that. And thank you for your service, sir. I appreciate that very much. And I know that our members do as well. And thirdly, we have Mr. Shawn Williamson, who is a renowned sculptor and stonemason. And I believe you're also an author. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, I write as a hobby, and my main raison d'etre has been building in stone, mm-hmm. Sculpting. I work as a consultant stonemason. I also do analysis of suspected antiquarian frauds from time to time, and I've replicated carvings, medieval carvings for museums, and later than that actually as well. Carve the copy one exactly, and that goes out on show to the people, and the one that needs protecting goes in the safe, so to speak. But my area, I worked with Dr. Andrew Sinclair as his researcher or man of stone for several years, and that started off with investigation of Knight Templar tombstones. Mm-hmm. So his academic esteem and my sort of practical stonemasonry skills, we came up with some fabulous information and breakthroughs and actual proof of that genre, the type of tombstones, Templar tombstones, which I've written a 10,000 word report on that, but I'm kind of sat on it at the moment. And lucky to have met Wayne, who contacted me. And as I'd been at sea in Canada, I just thought, wow, what a great connection. And I knew of Gretchen's esteem as a writer,
Yep.
Sort of the three of us just gelled, really. So it's an honor to be on your show, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate again for you three to be here. This is quite an honor, and I am a believer, as most of our members know already, in the Templar connection, not only to Scotland and then over to Nova Scotia, but and beyond into the North America, deeper into North America. I am a believer that they have been here, so it's an honor for me to be able to have you three here to give us a little bit more of an education on this, because that is something that has been lacking for me anyway, personally, and I'm sure with some others as well, to get a little bit more detail on exactly what you believe and what the research that you guys have worked on together. And with that, I'd like to start off with Wayne. Now, Wayne, you were the one that kind of brought everybody together. Is that correct?
Well, it's quite an interesting thing the way this happened, and about the 1980s, I was hunting back in the woods. We had a large snowstorm, and me and my brother were back there, and we had about a foot of snow. Wow. He went his way, I went mine, and anybody who's a hunter appreciates having some snow and ground cover and things like that. But I was going through to a new area that I've hunted for years, but I came in from a different way this time. And as I was approaching this area, I could see the river where I wanted to be, but I noticed that the land didn't look right. And as I got closer, you got to be careful going through a foot of snow because you just don't know what's underneath it. All of a sudden I come to a rock ledge. Oh, wow. And as I got closer, I said, holy man, this is about 30 feet down. Wow. So I made my way around, and I came upon this cave, which I call the cave. Having no experience at all in Templars and things like that, I was just amazed. So, being a police officer, carrying a large hunting rifle, that isn't going to scare me too much, I guess. So I did the smart thing. I threw a large stick inside because we have wolves and bears and mountain lions, and when they didn't throw it back out, I felt pretty good. And
yeah.
So I went in, and once I got in there, I realized that this wasn't your natural cave, because the walls were flat and square at 90 degrees. There was an entrance on the east end, and as I made my way, I could notice that there was a ceiling above me. It come to a hard right-hand 90-degree turn. So I went in there, and I could see that animals had been in there using it. Right. And then I noticed that there was a large entrance, and there was a stone in front of it. So I climbed over, a much younger man at that time, and able to do these things, and kind of stood back in admiration, and noticed a large round rock on top. And I guess with that, I'd like to take you on a PowerPoint presentation to how this came about.
All right.
And Carlos, you want to bring us in?
There we go.
This is our team logo. This was designed by our producer today, Carlos Fernandez, at Team Templar Studios here in Wisconsin. And he does a fantastic job, and we'd like to thank him. And also, I'd like to thank Gretchen Cornwall and Scott Williamson for their amazing work. In the last week or so, I've reached out to some Native American people. Chief Daniel Thomas, Strongwalker, traditional chief of the Delaware Nation, and also Sonia Isaac Surratt from the Mi'kmaq tribe from Nova Scotia. And Sonia was instrumental in providing me with some information today that I've never known before. And Gretchen and Shawn will be able to speak further on this, as I'm no historian. But what Sonia was so able to come up with is she said that the Templars were on their land, but they did not leave no gold on Oak Island. And she said when she went to her people for this information, they offered this without even asking. And she also mentioned the island of Cape Breton. That's where they went. And she said that their flag has markings of the Templars. and also that they use the sun and moon because these stars only align themselves every 100 years.
Wow.
So we're going to go back to Wisconsin now. And thank you, Chief Daniel Thomas and Sonia Isaac Surratt from the Mi'kmaq. I appreciate your help. In about the year 2017, I was sitting in my ground blind, and I came across what I call Frog Rock at the time. And Gretchen, after she came to Wisconsin, named it the Nightstone. And there's what you can see there. Gretchen took this photo of the way it looks in Wisconsin at the time that Gretchen was there. I'm standing in front of the tomb, and you can notice that there's a round rock on top. And this is heavily wooded, and it's not the most easiest thing to get into.
Yeah, nature does not make things quite like that. They don't do those angles that way. Yeah, right.
No. And you can see this is me going inside of the tomb, and there's that large rock I spoke about. Mm-hmm. And of course, Shawn Williamson, our esteemed Mason and ancient stone master. And I got a hold of Shawn by the courtesy of Gretchen. I reached out to Shawn and sent him a photo. And I'm sure Shawn was extremely busy at the time, but being a gracious gentleman as he is, he took time to respond back. And here you can see some of Shawn's artwork, stonework. It's just really impressive.
It is very impressive.
And also my partner in crime, Gretchen Cornwall. And how we met was very extraordinary. When I found a cross pate on a rock, I had no idea what to do with it. I'm not skilled in this type of knowledge. So I contacted quite a few authors, and they all thought I was this crazy guy. So that was fine. And then finally someone, well, why don't you contact Gretchen Cornwall? Mm-hmm. She knows a lot about this stuff. So I put on my investigator hat, looked up Gretchen Cornwall, did some research, and I reached out through her Facebook. I sent her a message, and I said, would you take a look at something for me? So I sent her one picture of a cross pate. And I don't think it was maybe 15, 20 minutes later, all of a sudden I got a phone call. And this woman came on the phone, and she says, is that what I think it is? I says, I don't know. You tell me.
Yep.
Gretchen, if you would like to add to that.
Oh, wow. I tell you, as a historian, that's exactly the type of an encounter one dreams of and rarely has. I just about fell out of my chair when I saw that image. And the deterioration rate was correct. Mm-hmm. The symbolism was correct. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had to know more. I had to find out more. And this is such a tremendous opportunity to understand what happened in North America between not only the indigenous peoples there, but the Templar fugitives who were escaping persecution. Right. And these peoples, would have united in order to survive. Now, these would have been capable, hardened men at arms who came richly resourced. And as friends, they might have been very useful to the welcoming tribe, who in turn helped them survive in a new landscape, as rich as it was. But the Templars would have taken their craft and skills with them. They're very capable of heavy excavation, heavy, fine, intricate carvings. Yes, that's the carving right there. And though it looks humble, it is not. It's deceptive. Mm-hmm. So it's like easy to walk past this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, you had said something about the fact that the weathering of it was about correct for its time period, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. If those lines were crisp and sharp. No, granted, I'm looking at this from an intellectual perspective, mm-hmm. and having been in front of carvings, ancient medieval carvings for nearly 20 years, right. Shawn is the master at this. Mm-hmm. So we're so thrilled to have him on board to be able to examine these carvings and hopefully in person in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the photos that you're going to see have not been released.
Wow.
And coming up, and maybe we won't have time to get to that, or maybe we have to save for a later episode.
Yeah, we may have a part two.
Yeah. And this is a picture of the tomb. Mm-hmm. And we have already talked about that. So I'm going to scroll by some of these pictures. And one has to remember, when you're up in this part of the woods, you're never alone. And this is a picture of a black bear that came in on my trail cam. So you have to be aware of your surroundings and who you're there. When Gretchen, where I were there was plenty of bear tracks around. And you can see there's a timber wolf.
Yep.
He had come into one of my locations. And there's a large male bobcat.
Yep.
And I wasn't fortunate enough to get the mountain lion on there, but they're there. Mm-hmm. And Shawn had me do something with some of the photos that I had taken. And he said, Wayne, convert these to black and white. Oh. And I was so grateful that I did. And what I did, I sent Shawn quite a few photos. And I did some comparatives. And you'll see this one is black and white. And the next one, well, this is going back to the original one I sent to Gretchen. Forgive the mismatch order.
Oh, I can clearly see the cross on there.
Yeah.
Center of it. Yep.
And can you imagine just coming across this large rock in the woods? You'd walk right by it.
Yeah. Yep.
And go ahead, Gretchen.
Apologies. It's important to understand the difference in the tools that were used. The indigenous peoples were not using pointed instruments to create these types of symbols. And Wayne and I traveled to 90 miles south to Rocha Cree State Park just to examine the difference in the carvings there that were known to be indigenous in these.
Right.
Night and day, because I was very concerned about cultural misappropriation.
Oh,
and that was very important to respect the peoples that lived there before European ancestors arrived. But just how far back did they arrive? So that's the history I'd like to find out. And what did they share together as far as their cultures were concerned?
Right. And that's a very interesting point, because as an investigator, you need to make sure that you're not looking at something like you said, cross. How did you pronounce that again?
Cultural misappropriation, taking somebody else's culture. And we all know that the Nazis did that. They took sacred symbols from around the world. They also took the symbols of the Knights Templar and abused and misused them. So it's very important to me to make sure, because I'm aware of that history, that I do not in kind create a destructive mythology.
Right. Yep. That's fantastic. Yeah, you can obviously see that. And again, with the erosion and also the lichen and the growth that would get on it, it would also help to destroy it over years as well. Yep.
Yes.
If you look at the cross pate, you can see the outstretched arms and it going straight up. And you'll notice that off to the right-hand side, there appears to be a circle. And the cross that they found on Oak Island, the lead cross, that head was going to the left.
Right.
Well, if you would invert that, this would be going to the right. And another thing, what I think is very important in doing my investigative work, the Vikings or the Norse, when they came, they didn't survive enough in order to stay in this country. And the tribes that they met weren't just these meek, mild-mannered people. They were warrior type class of people. But there has to be something so special about the Templars that the connection I'm trying to make is that for some reason, our ancestors, the Native Americans, must have felt they had a good heart to let them pass so far inland to provide them protection, to speak to the other tribes of the territories that they were coming into.
Yeah, that's got to be something else. I mean, in itself, because of the fact that they're traveling into unknown territory. They have no idea what they're going to encounter or who they're going to encounter. Are these people hostile or not? And we don't know just, how many there were of the Templars coming in at that time. Is there a sizable army coming in, or is there just a few, 100 or so? Who knows? So
yeah, Jeff, that's a good point. Forgive me if I'm interrupting, but I think this has been going on for a very long time.
Mhm.
And the Vikings, the Norsemen, are the ancestors of the Templars. I view William the Conqueror of England, who took the throne in 1066, as the last and greatest Viking raider. And we know that Newfoundland dates, the site there dates to 1000 AD. So they'd been going back and forth for a long time.
Right.
And the Duke of Normandy, the William the Conqueror, was married into the royalty of the Kingdom of France and those duchies in France. And just east of there, not too many years later, Bernard de Clairvaux was born. And he joined two failing abbeys, the Cistercian abbeys. And by the time he was done with his life, not only had he grown hundreds of Cistercian abbeys, but he was a major mastermind behind the Knights Templar. So there's a clear line all the way back. But I think the cultural shift in believing in love, now the Templars' original mission was one of peace and protection. They were warriors and they were fearsome. You didn't want to mess with them. You didn't. So they were quite capable, but they were also interested in alternative experiences, knowledge. They didn't mind who the messenger was. They wanted to learn. And that's one of the reasons why they got into trouble with the church and the Pope and the King Philip, because he felt threatened by them. All right. Sorry if that's too much.
No, please. I absolutely wonderful. And again, as I mentioned earlier before we got started, that this is going to be an education for us all, including myself, because I'm fascinated by this, and I know many of our members are as well. So please, anytime you have that kind of information, please share it with us like that. That's fantastic. So you got a picture there, Wayne. Go ahead.
There's an interesting connection with the Vikings and the Stockbridge tribe. One has to remember that the Mi'kmaq, the Abenaki, the Lenape, the Delaware, the Munsee, the Mohegans were all along this eastern seaboard, all the way up from Maine down to New York.
Right.
They were what they call the Algonquin people, and they could all speak the same language with just little variations. In the 1600s in the Hudson Bay area, when the Dutch were trading with the Stockbridge, they called them a peaceful tribe, and they were giving them watered down rum and trade for beaver pelts. Well, the Dutch tried to convert them to Christianity, and the Stockbridge wouldn't. And no matter how hard they pressed them, they said, no, we're not going to do this, because they were terribly afraid of the people in the longboats that would come back and punish them if they quit believing in the ancient Norse gods.
Wow.
And that's called the legend of Cornhair. And the Cornhair meaning the yellow hair of the corn, the Norwegian, the blonde-haired, blue eyes, I would assume.
Yep.
So the travels have been going on for a long time.
Wow. That's no doubt about that, and I think you're exactly right. And they would, as you said, they would find many of the native tribes as they're coming along the way. And as you mentioned, Gretchen, they're going to have to work with them. And the fact that the fact that they want to, because that's their very nature, would make them appeal in a different light to those natives Americans as they came across. So as long as they can keep that and make their way and make friends along the way and guides, it's like it makes total sense.
Well,
come in and just fight their way through like the conquistadors or whatever.
They had lost the Holy Land, Aco, the city of Accra. Aco was their last foothold, so they knew what it was like to get a nasty, bloody nose. And then, of course, the King of France, or the French king, turned against them, and his puppet Pope also was used to turn against them. So they'd had enough enemies. So I'm guessing, as somebody who wanted to get away, take something very important with them, survive, they would want to seek out friends, even if they've got their sword behind their back.
And this is where the specialty of Shawn Williams comes in. Shawn has not been able to make it on scene to this site, but I'd like to get Shawn's thought on this tomb picture that you can see.
Well, yeah, I mean, we discussed it productively, Wayne, when, you know, you've got the danger of perhaps confusing ruinous building with natural phenomenon, you know, geological makeup that perhaps looks more than it is. But, you know, I actually see the design of you know, a basic type of building being carried out on this site. Stones moved, carvings into what looks to be hard granite style rock type geological features. And having analysed the pictures of the carving, you know, you can see crosses, triangles, the cross pate, and other anomalous inscribings, shall we call them. And, you know, if somebody's going to make a mark on rock with a chisel, then, you know, you need good steel. You need a hammer or a mallet or something to drive the chisel to make the impression. And it's, you know, the marks were not made by animals. So we are trying to make out, you know, who made them and why. And why did they build it? Why does the rock formation around these areas look as if it's, you know, been built in a sort of a rudimentary way? You know, you see similar type things happening in Europe and Ireland, you know, built by the Celts. So I saw kind of the hand of man there. And one of my suggestions was to, you know, let's investigate below ground level, because as we know, Earth builds up around the rocks themselves over time, and it could be covering a lot more direct evidence. So, you know, we're planning on the investigations, making actually either using plaster or a resin or something like that to make a male mold from the reverse carving, and to see if there's any more evidence that we can, you know, find out directly. But it's also the sense of something big here. You know, it's not, you know, there's always too much attention brought to, oh, it's got to be empirical evidence, it's got to be direct, you know. But sometimes, you know, many great areas have been found through intuition, you know, and all other ways that aren't regular. I call them irregular ways, and it's going to be a fascinating project, and you just got the feeling that it's going to bring forth some very, very interesting historical truths.
And that's really interesting to have your perspective on that, because here we have, you know, Wayne and Gretchen looking into the history behind, you know, Gretchen has so much of her knowledge in the Templars coming over and through Oak Island and on their way into, you know, into the interior of North America. And then Wayne's, you know, being able to find these and recognize these, and his abilities as a police officer and an investigator to be able to invest this. And then your perspective coming in as a stonemason and a person who works with stone and carvings and such of that nature. I mean, it is, you created the perfect trio of knowledge here to be able to decipher this stuff. And that's just fantastic.
It's amazing how this all came together. As we had spoke earlier, we kind of see this as a diamond with many facets. Gretchen brings her expertise. Shawn brings his expertise. I look at it a completely different way. And one of the most amazing things about this whole find and how it started, that it's over 40 years old. And Gretchen can attest to this, that when you're back in this area, even though I hunted this for many years, and I've always came across this, that when I was back there, that I was misplaced. I knew where I was, but it just seemed like something wasn't right. So when my sons got old enough to hunt, and then I was asking one of them sitting around the table, and I said, back there by the tomb in the cave, or whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, I said, can I ask you something kind of personal? And they said, sure, Dad, what is it? I said, you ever felt misplaced back there? And they both looked at me like, oh, the old man's losing it, I guess. And they said, no, Dad, we felt the same thing.
Wow, that's very interesting.
And I said, what did you feel like? They said, we felt like we didn't know where we were at. It didn't happen all the time, but it would come and go. And I had talked to there was a fourth team member that I will not mention at this time. It's in the works. And we had talked about this at great length. But when Gretchen came and she got a chance to be near the tomb and in the tomb, she got a chance to feel this firsthand.
Now, I read that in her book. I was reading your photo journal and have thankfully finished it. And it was fantastic, by the way, Gretchen. And I read that you had made a comment in there about when you were on site and how it gave you a feeling. Could you describe that a little bit?
Well, having been in sacred places of power in Europe, that hit me full force. There was power there. And you don't get that same feeling at McDonald's, do you? And it wasn't just the ominous architecture, which it is. The photos do not do this justice whatsoever. It is, you feel the weight of that massive boulder. You feel it all. And I actually felt as if somebody had a timer and then decided that we'd seen enough. And I just felt this incredible wave of physical peril, as if a big bear was coming over the hill, or somebody with a shotgun saying, okay, you've had enough, go away.
Time to go.
And I responded to that in a very visceral way. And I always think I have a poker face, but I've been told I don't. But Wayne asked me, are you all right? And I said, well, I think we need to leave now. And I really thought something physically wanted to harm us at that point and wanted us out of there.
Wow.
So it is a power point. It is a power place.
Yep.
And we were allowed in for a specified period of time.
Right.
And it's a strange place. And I think that the experiences Wayne and I had were mirrored in the oddities that happen on Oak Island. Equipment malfunction, strange lights, feelings, apparitions, on and on and on. But and I think that those places of power are often imbued with protection in order to frighten people away and control the amount of information that's there. When I first arrived there and Wayne took me out on day one, I tell you, I didn't see very much. And I was crestfallen and disappointed, and Wayne could see that. And I had to go away and remember the erosion, lighting, and other atmospheric phenomenon that would affect how one sees an ancient carving. And several days later, I just got down to research. I went to the Stockbridge Muncie Information Center, started looking into the tribes in the area, tried to meet people. And we went back after this massive, epic, movie-worthy thunderstorm. And it just poured rain and sheet lightning. We got there, and literally Wayne said a prayer and said, please let us see, let me open my eyes. And I tell you, I saw more in that moment. There are carvings on that stone that weren't there the first time. And I took hundreds of pictures, but they did not translate. The images in the book were the most clear, but there is much more there. So, I'm so grateful that Shawn is on the scene. He has technology information that I don't have, Wayne didn't have. And I came away knowing I'd only scratched the surface of that the night stone, as I called it.
Mm-hmm.
And in examining the Westford night in comparison, there is a real comparison there. So it was, forgive me for all of that. It was just such a tremendous experience, both of, okay, your time is up, get out of here, and impending peril. And then also the different way we could see what was available at those 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I know. Shawn, you too. I know that there was I think I read in one of your, after one of your sculptures that you've done, and forgive me, I've forgotten the name. I believe it was a female sculpture that you had done. You had a feeling of something during that time as well, did you not?
Oh, yeah. No, you get intuitions. I mean, I believe that the guy that found eventually came across what was supposed to be the ruins of Troy, had dreamt about, nobody could find them, but this guy found it through a dream, and there's other ways to approach investigation of this nature, I think. And I think with the combination of different cultures being involved together, it really strengthens the bond, and it also strengthens that, I guess you would call it, perhaps, in Gretchen's words, like a sacred bond to the earth in that respect.
Right. And you're getting a perception of some sort or a feeling from that. That's interesting, because when you put yourself into something so emotionally, that I think that emotion, you're very susceptible to picking up emotion from it as well. And there could be something there that's, we could talk all day about things in the paranormal, but I think that's a sense that you get, and that's very interesting. Very, very interesting.
I think what I should have added actually was there's an electromagnetic thing going on with stone somehow. We seem to be able to interact with it, because when I've done testing for forgeries and stuff, it's an intuition. If somebody's putting heart and soul into their work, you get that back from the stone itself. But if you're putting something in that's based on money and trying to make something look like it should, you can pick up on that sense as well. And I tested out 10 with this dealer in Mayfair, a big antiquarian dealer, and I got 7 out of 10 right on testing for if actually they'd been made as forgeries. Right. So I wasn't too far off with that, but I was able to examine tool marks, carving techniques, precision lines, indications of how sharp chisels were, indications of what chisels were used. But then there's also this other thing of intuition, of being able to gauge something that's false, by somehow getting something back from the stone. So I've always felt that with stone, and that's one of the things that keeps me working it in different ways. And I just can't wait to get over to the site with the team and stuff, and really get to grips with it.
Absolutely. For you to be there, I can't wait for that. You know what? I would love to be there as well, because I was thinking, because I'm from the UP of Michigan. I'm a Uper, in my heritage, and so I love that whole area. And it wouldn't be too far away for me to take a little run to go over to Minnesota and join you guys. I'd love to do that. So when you guys get together, make sure you tell me, because I might just find a flight, and get over there.
We'll have to invite you around the campfire for some tall
That would
tales.
be awesome. That would really be awesome. But I know Wayne, you must get that same kind of sense when you're out there. You're so in, your roots. And the thing about the fact that you've been there for so long, you've hunted the land, you probably have that feeling as well when you're there. Is that not right?
Well, yes, and it was almost like I was led to this area because I had never seen this rock before. It's very well hidden. And so basically 40 years pass. It's kept bothering me all this time. Working in police department, major investigations, raising a family and things of that. I'd always come back. And then it led me to this rock with a stone with a cross pate on. And then from there, I just had to go further. Became friends with Gretchen and led to her coming, a book, learning. They're educating me so well in all things Templar. So then that led me with the knowledge that she was able to provide me with. I went back into the cave and we found so much more. But through this, I got to know Shawn a little better. And that was a real blessing in itself. And as Shawn become, I would say, a friend, and he to trust me, he began to tell me stories. And Shawn has a great admiration for the Native American people. And Shawn, if you would tell some of your encounters with Native Americans, I think it's truly amazing.
Yeah, well, when I was first at sea on the Great Lakes as a boy, I was 18, and I was on the Canadian Hunter. There was a great guy there that belonged to, I think it was the Seminoles, if I've pronounced that right. But he told me I'd got a bear guardian, and later on, I actually learnt to carve soapstone on the Great Lakes from Thunder Bay. That's what I used to do. We're out on Lake Superior quite often, and all of the different lakes and stuff. So I was kind of learning about Native Americans in that respect. And then after I'd come back to this country, I went back to Vermont in, I think it was about 2002. And I got introduced to the Abenakis who actually, I think in, American history, they fought with the French against the British. And I think they're quite a unique culture in that respect. The way they dress and stuff, the headdresses go round the top of the head rather than falling down the back. And, one of what we were discussing, which they were really fascinated about and which they really wanted to do, was, I was just like a technician. I was going to teach them stone carving. Then they were going to carve their own clan symbols on the stones. And, there was a connection between me and them. And lo and behold, one of their guys also said, you've got a bear guardian. So that came from two separate sources. I don't know what I was doing over there. I was just, I should have carried on at sea or whatever on the lakes. I was down the eastern seaboard. And there I was, my father was based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He was also in St. John's, Newfoundland. He got me the work basically with Upper Lake Shipping. And, I'm going over these places where probably the Templars were without knowing why. But it was kind of fed into me, all this stuff, bit by bit. And it stayed with me ever since. I don't know what's going on with it, but everywhere, it seems to have been a revisit of stuff that's gone on in my ancestors were actually from Clan Gun, up in in Scotland, and that's how I was connected to the Sinclairs. So obviously, I was connected to some kind of quest, and that's what I like to call it. It's a quest. I don't actually know where it's going, but when I met when Wayne contacted me, this stuff started to come back again, and then I started to talk to Gretchen about her knowledge and stuff, and everything gelled. But just whilst I'm on it, there was one thing here that I never mentioned to anybody, and that was I did watch a series of the Oak Island, and they did find a chisel at one point in time. And the curious thing about that, I don't know if this was picked up, but it had a big head on it, which is it's called a mallet head. And that's the sort of chisel that a European stonemason would use on roughing out stone for ashlars or, for cathedrals.
Oh, really?
And that's and why that was there on Oak Island, which is obviously heavy engineering and all the rest of it, just made me think a little what's going on with that,
Mm-hmm.
So I think you might be able to date the steel on that for the Oak Island chisel, but that's my chisels, is my trade, and I can recognize them. I know how old they are, the steel, the different types of steel to be used, the different types of shapes. There's multiple various techniques for working stone, and I aim to bring all that to bear on at Wayne's Wisconsin project, helped by Gretchen, etc. And I'm so looking forward to the whole thing.
Thank you. That was phenomenal, Shawn. Forgive me, I had trouble logging in today, and I've just realized that my computer is not plugged into the wall. My battery is going to go down soon, so I'm just going to rudely interrupt you both and disappear for just a second.
Go right ahead. Yep. That's very interesting, and I do remember that episode, Shawn, when they found that chisel, and I think you're talking about the actual. I don't know if you'd call it the head of it or the port of it that's hit by a hammer. Now that had a particular shape to it. Yeah, that's very interesting.
They used to use the mallet headed. It's they used that formation when they were making the chisel, forging it. Mm-hmm. So it's used with back then it would have been a heavy wooden mallet. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting dimension, I think, to that. Usually, if you're roughing out heavy sort of stonework or whatever, heavy type engineering, the chisel different. You would use a steel hammer to get more impact, Right. But why that was there, I don't know. But it was that's just, again, it's the kind of a chisel that you would find in a European cathedral mason's yard.
Right. So there was no good reason for it to be there. In other words, yeah, absolutely. And they
really, no.
Things like that. Yep.
Only if there's something else going on that they haven't discovered yet. But it was certainly, like I say, something that you would find on a European cathedral in a mason's yard.
Yeah, something we didn't pick up on at all. Wow, interesting. And I don't think they really talked about that too much either on the show. And a lot of people, when they see stuff like that, we watch the show time and time again, and we see them finding, a cribbing spike or an oxen shoe or something like that, and you're thinking, oh, well, it's another oxen shoe, but they all tell a story.
Yeah.
And like your response on this particular thing, you picked up on something about that particular chisel that most people would have just disregarded. Well, it's another chisel. Okay, so they used it for whatever. But you saw a perspective on that tells a bigger story, and that's what's so fascinating. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think they're going to find more of that type of evidence.
Yep. And who would have brought something like that there? That's the other part of that.
Yeah.
How would
exactly.
Yep.
Oak Island has several articles now that have been dated and are datable, such as Dr. Ian Spooner had dated the stone platform in the swamp to 1220, which is very specific. In the 1990s, coconut fibers were found on the island, apparently in their bucket loads, and those were dated to 1200 by 5 different tests. Now we have this handheld chisel that Shawn has been describing that requires a wooden mallet of European descent. Then there's the lead cross that was found, and that takes us back to southern France. I know I'm forgetting something. It just keeps going. And as I think that, the charcoal and the nail that was found together at the New Serpent Mound,
Right.
that was dated between 1340 and into the 1400s. So, the evidence for repeated visits is there. And part of what I'm going to be bringing out in the near future, hopefully within the year, is another reason why and those items are there, who carried them. I actually have a specific name, and I know the castle that this individual came from, and he had Templar ties. So I know who it was, I know when it was, and it directly ties in with Zena Halpern's map and the date of 1347. The evidence is mounting, it's mounting, it's mounting. And now that's not to say that obviously, the things they're pulling out of the ground, the wood, the dendrochronology is dating that to late Elizabethan to, mid 1600s. So, that's another layer of activity. So we have to go with the science. We have to look at when those objects might have been used, who could have been carrying them, and that's what Shawn's talking about. And if you keep track of those incidentals, oh God, it's a boring button. Well, that button says that somebody was on that island, where they were from, were they British, were they French, what era were they there? So, you can't overlook the humble. And over years, in fact, I view, listening to Shawn speak here, what Shawn was saying about being in North America and engaging with the tribes that he came across, and not really knowing why he was there, but years later it manifests itself into this project right here. And Wayne had the exact same experience. He's in front of these monuments, he's working with these monuments, he's hunting, he's etc. And now here he is, years later, and it's coming together. And on Oak Island, those gentlemen would have gone west. They would have gone west.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
when you think about it in its entirety, how would I find or be led to a cross pate out in the woods on the Mohican Reservation?
Exactly.
And then come in contact with Gretchen Cornwall. I had no knowledge of any stonemasons, and here comes Shawn. So there's a greater hand upon this. And I think it's just truly amazing, the expertise, not from myself, but for Gretchen and Shawn, that they bring to the level of this discovery.
Absolutely. And that's phenomenal that you guys would all be together in this and being able to, because we all want answers. And with the expertise of the you three coming into this, and like we said about even the things that they found over the last 8 seasons, I know they've been on the island longer than that. I think the Leguinas have actually been there 14 or 15 years, but the show's been going on for like 8 seasons now. And they keep finding all these pieces. And like you said, Gretchen, you found a button. Okay, big deal. It's a button. No, that button tells a story. Each piece tells a story. And that's the same thing for you guys. Now you're working on the fact that the Templars have made their way further west. And like you said, Gretchen, there was nowhere else for them to go. I mean, you could go further north, I suppose, but I mean, really cold and ice and everything up there. So let's go into the interior. Let's go west. And they did, now you're piecing together the evidence that shows that they had done just that.
Yes.
And I think there's also, there's some of the stones that were found, like the Kensington stone and things of that nature. How does that tie in? I mean, is that part of this as well?
Absolutely. That's 200 miles west of Wayne's location. It shows a clear trajectory. And this site, the Night Stone, Site 1, Site 2, Site 3, they are a clear indication of quite a lot of activity, perhaps joint, but they would have followed the natural lay of the land because that's what you would have to do as human beings to conserve your energy and your strength. You're going to do the easiest thing you possibly can because it's hard going anyway. Why they did it, perhaps I have several theories about that. Maybe that's for another day. But I feel that Wayne's location validates Oak Island. And I think that they went west, and perhaps there might be other relay stations. I think they might have been attempting to build a line of travel as they did across Europe, leading to the Holy Land. Their whole thing was an infrastructure and roads, and they were often placed, their preceptories, commanderies were often placed at crossroads. They wanted to know who was coming into the area, who was going out, and could they control who was coming in and out. Right. So they would have been very, very used to wanting to have that line of travel and to refresh their needs for rest and recuperation. And you see that play out across Europe, where as a pilgrim, you could rest with them and they could take, you would give them your money so that you would pay them to go to the Holy Land. They would look after it. And they created what is a simple banking system. But what was unique about them is you could count on them. They were first on the battlefield, last. They never ransomed themselves. And there was a lot of piracy going on at that time, not too dissimilar to today. And pilgrims were being dumped overboard on the way to the Holy Land, having their worldly goods taken from them. So here come the Templars, and it's, oh boy, you mean I can actually get there safely? Right. So they're taking all that experience and they're putting it into North America. So I'm convinced there are other sites between the Kensington Runestone going all the way to Oak Island. But, finding them is the kicker. And Wayne's got a jewel of a site that I believe was going to be an important commandery preceptory.
Right.
And there's one thing that's also maybe you weren't aware of, Jeff. We've discovered 2 additional sites.
Oh, really?
My son, Paul, who was hunting, and once he started to become familiar with this, you have to cross a large river. And so he said, Dad, I was back there hunting. And he said, I saw this fish symbol on a rock. Wow. I says, well, can you draw it for me? So he drew it out in the old style, Greek style. And I said, well, did you take pictures of it? He says, no, I forgot my phone in the truck. Oh, great. So we had to wait till the spring. And then
hopefully find his way back out there again to the same spot.
Well, that was a challenge because I had to wait across the river and he could just walk on these logs going across. And I said, I'm not doing that. I got my equipment and I'm not falling in for nobody. So I waited across the river and we must have looked for 2 or 3 hours. And I said, well, can you remember? Well, when you're hunting, the snow cover, as the leaves come back on in the spring, everything changes. Your perception changes.
Yep.
So about 2 or 3 hours later, I come across this large rock. And as I was looking at it, I says, come here. I said, is this what you saw? And there I could see the fish. And there's a circle around it.
Oh, really?
I took pictures of that. And Gretchen and Shawn helped me with this too. Also, I use a star mapping system on my phone. I have it downloaded. So when I come across these sites, I use a star mapping system to find out which stars are right overhead at that time.
Oh, wow.
Because the Templars obviously used the stars to travel.
Right.
The form of navigation.
Yep.
So I want to know why that rock is there and what star was overhead. Well, right overhead, when I brought the constellation up, it was the constellation Pisces, the fish.
The fish. Wow. That's really interesting.
And then my son tells me later that year, he said, Dad, he says, you got me hooked on this. He says, I found something else. He says, about 3 miles away in the woods. And so the next year we made another journey back through the woods and we come across these large cut stones. Shouldn't be in the woods. These stones shouldn't be there. So I sent them to Gretchen, and she looked at them and she was amazed. And this is how I came to the connection of eventually meeting Shawn. I sent him a couple of pictures. I said, would you take a look and give me your professional opinion? And he says, yes, he could tell that they've been worked, but everything was at 90-degree angles. They were large blocks. Some of them were 20 inches long. I got quite a few pictures with measurements. So there is actually 3 sites, and they almost line up with each other, going from the east toward the west. So we have some really good people here, I think, that can figure this out.
Man, oh man. And I know you must be really looking forward to getting over there, Shawn, and something I thought about, when you were talking about the magnetic resonance, I think it was about the stones themselves. Do you have any kind of equipment besides your own, personal body feeling of these things? But is there like certain equipment that you would use to be able to detect something like that in these stones?
Yeah, there's various instrumentation that can be used. I'm not an expert on it, but it's very similar to dowsing, and what can be ascertained through those types of means. I go with a direct feeling, and I look for actual evidence as well, and how stones have been arranged. You can see the hand of man or not,
right?
And so it's trying to get as much evidence as possible, that keeps the establishment archaeological set or group as happy as possible. But there's different ways to get to that point, and that was always the case when I was working with Dr. Andrew Sinclair on the evidence of Knight Templar tombstones, which was ridiculed en masse, but actually the case is proven. And I'm not an academic. Well, I don't know, maybe I am in a certain direction, but he was very, ex Oxford Don and stuff, and written 80 books and all the rest of it. But it's that combination that takes the day, and it's the combination of the academic scholarly approach and also other skills as a key set. And that's where I think this project's gonna quantum leap this type of archaeological investigation. And I'm hoping it's going to go on further, because this is the heritage, the hidden heritage to some extent of mankind, and I think it's a fabulous place, North America, to take this forward. And who knows? I was in Chile for several months, working in the same way. I came up with some revelations, and if it can be put together in a cohesive scholarly way, then it's win-win. And I think we can make a difference to this type of research, but coming from an irregular, in a regular lateral way.
May I comment briefly? It's easy I have 2 points to overlook what Shawn's talking about, because when you train to learn a skill set and then you apply the skill set, that's when you can, over time, because you're an expert in using those skills, that training, you can throw out the rule book at that juncture. You don't need to think about the rules. So, you don't read your driver's manual every day before you go get in the car. You don't even think about it. You just do it. So there is an element of that in this as well. So the other issue is that I find Wayne's location even more remarkable, is that these stones have a high content of quartz. There has been research done. We use quartz in watches. And what they're doing now, and I can't remember where I saw this, but it was an interview with a physicist, I believe. And what he was working on were these 1 inch by 1 inch square quartz crystals and imbuing them somehow, don't ask me how, I'm not a scientist, but imbuing them with actual repeatable data, not too dissimilar from when you put a file on your phone or on your computer. But he said that he could, on these 1-inch squares, put the entirety of the British Library in a shoebox.
Yep.
So, these stones with quartz have a scientific basis for holding energy and information that the human being, is able to be aware of at some level.
Jeff, when you were asking about specialized equipment, our fourth team member, he does this professionally.
Wow.
And there's some circumstances right now that are out of his control. But when I had contacted him in the summer of last year, he was going to send some specialized equipment to take the measurements. I'd put them near the sites. They would read for a month, and he'd send them back and have them analyzed. So I look at this again from an investigator's point of view. I had to have one person looking this direction, another person looking at it this way, Shawn bringing his skill, Gretchen hers,
right,
and also that other level. I don't want to say the word paranormal, but he was telling me that there's magnetic fluctuations and words that I can't even begin to pronounce.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Scientifically,
yes,
yeah.
So I was very fortunate to have talked with him at great length,
right?
And he was willing to come to do this, and hopefully things will work out and he can be there. So we're trying to cover all the bases here from different points of professional views.
Right, because I know even on Oak Island, when they found what they thought was the 90-foot stone in the book bindery, and then they brought it out and they actually did the scanning of it. I forget the name, LiDAR.
LiDAR,
yeah, I forget what they actually use. I know Linda will know.
Yes.
She's out in the chat there, and she knows exactly what it was called. But they looked at it closely with this scanning process, and you can reveal some of the things that you found on the stone out there in Minnesota. So if you are able to take a look at it with specialized equipment, then you can bring out and enhance what's there under all the years of erosion and weather. So that's what keys me. Then you add that science to it. Now you have your expertise of the three of you bring to the table, but then also the science of actual the equipment that will be able to take a closer look at it in another perspective, like you were looking for.
Seeing this fourth expert, he was able to bring in GPR, ground penetrating radar, and LiDAR, and also measure the magnetic fields. So we all three of it, we had thought about this as a team. How do we want to approach this? So you can see we're taking a many-faceted approach in how to bring this to fruition.
Yep, absolutely.
You can't be lazy. You can't make something up that you want to be there. You have to throw every doubt at it that you possibly can. And probable is a term, theory is a term, until something else comes along to overturn that theory. You really just have to examine every little nitty gritty. And I've done a lot of research, and you'd be surprised at how many, whilst 98.9999% of the time, academic resources that one would read are correct. Once in a blue moon, someone makes a mistake. And you can't write a book without making one mistake. It's just not, and I'm not talking grammar, I'm talking about information. It happens all the time. Right. So you can't take anything for granted. So in science, will never lie to you. And someone with Shawn's experience, he knows what he's looking at. He knows. And, Wayne, with his leadership experience, his years of law enforcement, he knows who he's dealing with when they're in front of him. He knows, So it's, I'm thrilled to see this develop. I can't wait to see how this progresses, but I want to know what happened there. And although, sun, moon, and stars wish story instead of history. But there's every reason in the world to investigate this, and every reason in the world for Rick and Marty to continue to investigate Oak Island, because it is our history, our shared history, as Shawn said.
Right, exactly, and just something as Rick Lagina always mentions, Marty, and they're similar in that respect that they want some of that history, but Rick leans more towards getting that history, know the who, what, why, when, and where.
Right.
And you have Marty who says, "Yeah, let's just find some treasure." So, but I'm on board with Rick. I mean, I am one of these people that I want to know the who, what, why, when, and where. And when you have all the clues that start to pile up that leads you down a particular path, people keep saying, well, there's no definitive reason, evidence that the Templars were ever in North America. I disagree. I think there is enough evidence to say that they definitely have been in North America.
Exactly.
Went further in. But then you get the academics, some academics that are saying, no, there's no definitive thing there. Yeah, so you're just, for whatever reason, they're not seeing the picture laid out before them. But you, as what you're doing here, is you're adding more, you're gaining more evidence, more of those pieces, and putting them together to come up with a clear picture.
Exactly. It cannot be treated as a one-off anomaly, or be thought of as perhaps a colonist brought over a family heirloom and then dropped it and it got lost and somebody else picked it up and hey, the Templars were here. That's not it. That's not what's happening here. And every time they dig out on that island, they find more and more and more. So we're seeing a very rich treasure of a journey. But the more information you have, the more knowledge you have of where you could find a treasure. You don't just go out and start digging. You spend a lot of time.
One of the things that I found amazing was with this location is that all of our evidence is in rock. And as Shawn was explaining, it's difficult, and the Native Americans wouldn't have that capability. But when I was assembling this team, we came up with Team Templar North America for that reason. And as I talked to each one personal, we had many personal discussions because I wanted to find out what kind of people they were. And in doing so, we come up with this belief that Team Templar doesn't search for gold or treasure. We're searching for truth, because once you find that truth, there you will also find your treasure.
Right. Yep. I agree 100%. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Rick would agree with you very much so on that as well, Rick Lagina. We have quite a few of our members that are out here that are watching, there's so much, we've had 135 comments that's been going by here, and I've missed most of them, and I apologize to members out there as I've missed most of what's going on, because I'm just so enthralled with our conversation here. But like Jennifer even said, Jennifer Brent, she mentioned that theories are just a starting direction. As more information comes in, you have to be willing to change directions. That's kind of what makes the journey. And there is no road to follow. It makes its own road as you go along. And I think what you're saying. So
there's nothing like being the point person in an expedition where there is no road. And Wayne, it took him a lot of courage to send that to me. And the one thing about the equilateral cross is it is known the world over. What makes this different are the splayed arms that I found in the carvings. That's Templar. That's medieval Europe. That's the difference here. And when we investigated the cave together, that's where I found the sword, where the hilt was a cross with splayed arms, or a split, And then I took the lichen off of the nightstone, the side of the stone, and found a capped triangle. In other words, a small triangle on top of a bigger one. There are all sorts of ways to explain that, but one of the ways that I thought about it is that was Templar 2.0. You can fill books with that subject. But I would like to go back because I was not able to investigate and clear the other side of the stone, the night stone, because if you're going to remove lichen, you got to do it really carefully, or you could stand a chance of ripping apart any evidence or stone there. So you can't just go in there and start crashing through a location. You have to treat it like a detective scene, and Wayne would very much know that and understand that. And Shawn has, archaeology experience and knowledge. So he understands those principles of treating a site gently, even though you're dealing with big rocks.
Oh, absolutely. Because like you said,
Yeah.
that lichen or that growth on there is going to find any nook and cranny into that rock surface. And if you just rip it off, you're likely going to rip off some of that rock surface with it. So that's going to damage it. But I know, like you had mentioned, that aren't you also a member of the British archaeology?
Yes, I want to learn as much as I can. I watch documentaries endlessly. In the UK, there's a program called Time Team. The reruns are incredible.
I've seen that. Yeah,
You learn a lot by watching other professionals, and I respect them. I don't want to sit here and say I do not respect the academic world, because I do. I have experiences that lead me to my own conclusions and opinions and confidence. They have theirs, but I can certainly appreciate their skill, their education, their application, their knowledge, and I respect that. And I don't want to at all say that I don't appreciate science or the academic world, because it doesn't matter who the messenger is. Just learn from anyone. And that's part of what made the Templars so successful, but it was also part of the reason why they were brought down when it came to the trials, because they were fraternizing with other cultures. So, and that was a big no-no. You don't fraternize with your Muslim neighbors. You don't learn from them. You don't learn alchemy from them. You don't learn astronomy from them. You don't learn navigational skills from them. So, in other words, you're going to fail.
Exactly. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense not to. I mean, come on. If they have knowledge, and it's the same thing that Wayne has done here. If somebody else has knowledge to bring to the table, why not go after that? I mean, that just totally makes sense.
Yeah, and there were even a few women that were invested into the Templar order as well. So one mustn't become clouded by beliefs, whatever they may be, when you're dealing with someone different who has knowledge that could benefit your own culture. Train, find out, ask as many questions as you can, find out as much as you can.
Right. One of the things that I learned through years of police work, we had a homicide scene. So I had my team come in and search for this homicide weapon. And they said, we can't find it. So I called in another team. Well, this really made the other officers feel bad. And I said, just hold on, just take a breath. So they come through and they searched and they found the gun. And they said, after a while, we had a meeting and they said, why did you do that? I said, think about it. Everybody hides stuff different, don't they? You know where you would hide something. You'd know where you'd put something and where you would look. I said, don't let that bother you. I said, we all look for things in different ways.
Exactly.
So that's how I'm trying to approach this. And God bless us. That's the team we have before you today.
Yep. And there's a lot of people that are jumping on board and saying, I love the team name. Team Templar. I mean, quite a few of the members here have jumped on board saying that's fantastic. And I got to tell, because I was talking to Linda Simpson, our admin here, that I said I was calling you the Templar Trio. And it's like when I was getting this together, I said, yeah, the Templar Trio. I've been trying to get everything coordinated with them on this, and I thought that was kind of a click. But the Team Templar, that's fantastic. And it's you guys are just really getting this started, but it's fascinating. And I'm just, I know you have more to share, but I can't wait to see where this goes. I mean, I'm just fascinated by it.
We're in the process of right now. You have to remember, these are tribal lands. And there's a process. In order to get Gretchen here, I had to go to our tribal council, explain why I wanted her here, then get permission. And she could at that time she could only come for 10 days, and it's extremely difficult to do anything in 10 days.
Oh, yeah.
But I've met with our tribal leaders and talked to them and explained that we have to keep this quiet because we don't need a lot of people coming there with metal detectors and shovels and things like that. And that we're not looking for treasure, gold, or stuff like that. We're looking for the truth and history.
Right.
And so we're on that part of that stage to be able to be there and look for several months. And that's why we're bringing in videographers in to record this in real time.
See, that's fantastic.
Whatever it happens, we may find it's nothing. And then again, the proof is in the granite.
Mm-hmm. And that's, you talk about coming out there with metal detectors and, under controlled circumstances, I think that would be a good idea, because then, just like they have done so on Oak Island, they would find either a coin or a chisel, like we talked about with Shawn there, or some type of tools that there's always stuff left behind, always. And if you can find these things by the means of the metal detectors or other equipment that you would bring on site, that just helps to validate your findings. And then you go from there. So, I mean, has that been done yet? Has there been any metal detecting in the area?
I'm a novice metal detector. You'd probably let me look for coins in your backyard, but so I'm going to leave that to another skill set.
Mm-hmm.
We need Gary Drayton.
Yeah, I was going to say Gary.
Gary,
he would love
when
to.
we need you.
Yeah, Shawn has some great ideas how to go about this. So when Shawn gets here, he will bring forward that knowledge. And then once we get that, we will find the people who wish to be part of this.
Right.
But the only people that we will bring on board are those who respect what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And then, so that's the way Team Templar works.
Right. Yep. Yeah. You have to come into this with the mindset of and it's something when I've talked to Dr. Aaron Taylor, who's an archaeologist on the island, and also with Laird Niven, the archaeologist on the island. When I've talked to these guys, they have laid out very simply, I said, and I asked this question of Laird pointedly. I said, do you think there's treasure on the island? He goes, I don't think about the treasure. That's not what I'm there for. I'm looking for artifacts in the ground that are going to tell a story and put that story together. So he's looking for the proof in the dirt. He don't care about that. And that's something that when he was first asked to be on the island, or they put out, this was years ago, back when Tom Nolan and Dan Blankenship were on the island working together. They had reached out to archaeologists in the area to come and help validate some of what they're finding. And at that time, nobody wanted to do it because archaeologists are not treasure hunters. And he made that very clear. Right. And anybody that would associate themselves, any archaeologist that would associate themselves with treasure hunting would probably be ridiculed in that field. So nobody wanted to apply. And Laird was one of the few that said, okay, he looked at it as a different perspective. And kind of what you're talking about here is that he looked at it in the perspective of, let's do this correctly. If we're going to do this, if we're going to have an archaeologist on the island, which I think they need, let's do it correctly. Do we want to have more Robert Dunfills out here destroying the landscape and digging this huge hole and destroying all the artifacts around the area? Or do we want to have it done methodically and preserve what we find and document what we find as we go, which is the approach you're taking, which I think is fantastic.
See, like both of these sites, all three sites in their totality, the tomb has probably been only investigated 5 to 10%.
See,
Site 2 was the fish symbol, and Site 3 with the massive stone boulders, that has never been adequately investigated. I did a lot of measurements and a lot of photos and things like that. But it wouldn't not be correct for me to come there to do that unless I had someone, Shawn, leading that way, because he can approach this in such a way that nothing's going to be damaged. Right. And he can look at it prior to and say, I know what to do now. Mm-hmm. So that's why Shawn is on board.
Right. I apologize for interrupting. I'd love to get Shawn out to see Ross Castle It is a controversial site
Mhm.
with Alessandra. She and her husband Tim own that site. And the Templar cross pate marker that has been moved to a museum to protect it. I'd like to see a comparison through Shawn's knowledge
Mhm.
of Ross Castle as compared to Site 3, Wayne's site. So that would be a very interesting correlation.
Yeah, and I'm going to have Alessandra on the show. She's going to be coming on here with us, and I get an opportunity to talk to her and get some of that knowledge as well about, like you said, the castle there at Ross, and the well and the stone that she found. I guess that stone has actually been taken away and put in a museum now to preserve it, which is fantastic. But yeah, more information, right? I mean, more stuff that needs to be looked into. That's great. I'm really looking forward to that.
I think, just to jump in here, that some of my early sort of research about the Templar Order, they had their own system they had what they call Templar stonemasons or Templar masons, and they undertook a very, very similar vow to the knights. They were actually called. There was 3 different groups, but I think at one time they were called the Children of Solomon, and their vow was virtually exactly the same one as the knights would take, as organized by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. So you can see how strong the building culture was amongst the order, and so that we've got further evidence there as to their ability to move stone, mine. Look at the fabulous castles they built in the Middle East. I mean, these were just unbelievable.
Yep.
The really interesting thing that was that one of Saint Bernard's brothers, a brother monk, was called Achard, and a Cistercian. He was responsible for the training of medieval stonemasons in Europe, trainees, to bring into the Templar Order as well, because you can see a pincer movement here between the military might and also their building technical skills.
Right.
We're looking at an organization really that was moving towards creating a republic, and that was obviously a threat, as Gretchen pointed out before. So, perhaps they were investigating, other areas like North America to try and re-establish their order, because they were well aware that they were under threat,
Right. And I've kind of talked about that a little bit previously in some of my shows, that and it's kind of one of my beliefs, whether I'm right or wrong. I don't have anything really to back it up other than my feeling, but that that the Templars, if they are escaping to North America, are they going to continue to call themselves the Templar Knights? Are they going to continue to carry the same name so that they can soon be found out? Oh, there's some of them still alive and they're over in North America now, so let's go after them. Or are they going to, change a little bit, modify and become the Masons or the Freemasons, or work their way into staying here, but under under a different name or different group? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Well, it was an open secret. They were across Europe, and they just changed their name in Spain. And the French king said, well, I want to send in my inquisitors. And the Spanish king, recognizing their ability, their wealth, you don't just show up in armor. That's expensive. Trading a knight is expensive. We're talking about high-end, gear today that our top military would have. Very expensive stuff. So the Spanish king said, well, I've got a bunch of angry, high-tech, well-trained, fit men who would like to have a conversation with you. So the other thing is that not too many people are aware of is that Portugal was carved out of Spain, if you will, and that is a Templar kingdom. And the first king, if you will, was the nephew of Bernard de Clairvaux.
Oh, wow.
So the other thing that might have been a worry for Philip, King Philip, when he had them arrested in 1307, was that they might have been thinking about creating a kingdom in southern France. That's Mary Magdalene land. They had mines there, resources. It was warm. You could grow food easily. There is, plenty of access to the Mediterranean Sea there and across to the Atlantic. So that would have been a choice bit of real estate. So, thinking that might be an issue, that could be another reason why he attacked them. But there does seem to be a transmission of similar ideas that went forward through the 1450s. I'm going to get that wrong. In Germany, they were very, imbued with the Templars and, of course, the Teutonic Knights. But the Rosicrucian movement started there.
Right.
And you see a lot of the same tendencies in that society. And then, of course, after that, you see those tendencies play out in the Freemasons. So it's more like a multi-pronged fork, if you will, rather than and there are people who are convinced that they are Templars today and have had a clear line of succession from their family traditions being passed down through the centuries.
Yep, absolutely. And I did want to say too, Gretchen, that we have Judy Rudebish is out there and she's a member of our group, and she's out there and she wanted to say hi. She's actually watching.
It's nice to hear from you. Big hugs.
Yep, we've seen her on the show, and we'd love to have her and Aaron, Helton come on the show at some point.
Oh, Aaron! Wow, I tried grappling with that map, but I'm not a cartographer, and I so appreciated the skill and confidence that Aaron portrayed and projected, in her. And it takes courage to come up with a theory that you're going to get shot down with, but she's clearly a professional woman with a lot of knowledge, and you just have to keep pitching. You just have to keep at it. Throw the baby out with the bathwater. Try again. And I mean, I can't do as she does. Maybe so I'm excited to see what she'll do next. And Judy was my introduction to the War Room, for which I am grateful for. And so I've never met her in person, but I have a lot of affection for her and our past communications together. So
hey, Jeff, let your all your viewers know, and those who join your show, that on behalf of Team Templar, thank you. It's humbling to be here and to have this way to bring this to life. And for that, Team Templar also thanks you.
Well, I tell you, it's been an honor because of the fact that like I told you early on when we started, I am a believer that the Templars have made their way here, and I think that in generations they're still here. And that they're in the United States, and I was actually introduced to this idea prior to ever getting involved in Oak Island or anything like that. I actually forget where that came from, but I had heard a little bit about what you are talking about here today before I even knew of you, and that means that it was trickling out. Some of this information was trickling out because I heard about it, and I'm a believer in that. And then to find out that there was an opportunity for me to have you guys on the show and come and help us to understand what you have found out so far, I couldn't pass up that opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just phenomenal that you would be able to come on. And so the honor is ours, quite honestly.
Wait till
many of our members are saying, love hearing this information. So that's Susan. She's out there talking about it now. Just love hearing this. And everybody's saying the same thing.
Well, the wonderful thing about being together as a team, I'm sorry, Wayne, is it creates a synergy. And you're having people watching us right now, questions and it creates a synergy, and it's actually very inspiring, and that can lead us yet again to different ways of thinking about things. That's a team can do that for you.
Right.
You different ways of looking at something, and that's what Wayne brought up earlier by bringing in that other team, because they had a potentially different perspective and way of viewing the information, same information.
Just wait till your viewers get a chance to come into the cave with us.
Oh,
The pictures we haven't shown yet.
That's something that, like I told you earlier, that I definitely want to do. I want to get out there because if that's possible, I know whatever I have to do to go through the process of being accepted there, that whatever I have to do, I'd love to, because that would just be fascinating to me, because I just, like I said, I'm a believer in this, and to be able to, and I know that like what you were saying, that, and even for you, Gretchen, when you went out the first time and you were with Wayne, and I read in your book that you were a little let down because you weren't seeing everything. It took that second trip out to be able to, after the rain and the thunderstorm, and you're kind of recalibrating your thinking process on the old thing. You were able to go back and see
the carvings are subtle, and what I wish that I could have included this picture in my book, but it's a documentary series called Buried Nights, 4 episodes that culminates in Portugal at a church there, which they apparently did not have a history of. And in certain lighting, you could see quite clearly a good sized, Templar cross pate on the wall. Maybe and the guys, standing in front of it, the two hosts, they were back and forth, side to side, go, oh, that's very subtle, but it was there. And what I did is I took that picture. I don't have Shawn's experience, but I thought, okay, well, I can see it. So I took that and Alessandra's cross pate on that marker stone. They had the same level of erosion. And then I looked at Wayne's photographs and I thought, yeah, it works. If you can triangulate, if you can get 3 pieces of supportive evidence, then you've got something.
Right. And you're exactly right. You're exactly right. By looking at that and some of the pictures, I looked at some of your first pictures that you had taken when you were first out there. And I was the same way. I'm looking at the picture and I'm like, oh, man, I'm really struggling to see it. But then when you went back and you got the second round of pictures, everything seemed to come into focus. And there's definitely some evidence there. Something I wanted to ask Wayne too, is that you talked about the 3 different sites. How close in proximity to each other are these 3 sites, Wayne?
The tomb is located on one side of the river, and I can't give directions specifically.
Understand.
And then the fish symbol is on the opposite side, and the other structure is I can say to the east, probably I got it down to within 3 miles, but it puts that large stone structure in such a location that probably from that point they were going further west. And that's why these massive stones were there. And you have to put yourself back in time. During that time in these forests, it wasn't like what you think it is today. These were massive pine trees, probably 4 or 5 feet across, 6 feet across. You could see for 100 yards. So there wasn't all of this underbrush, which you'll be able to see in some of the pictures that I've taken. So the travel was a lot easier. And I'm sure as people moved into these areas and found these large stones, they may have repurposed them for other uses.
Right. You're very right.
And torn these buildings down. But what's remarkable, what we call Site 3 or the fortress, there's no roads there. This would have been all heavily wooded. And there was no access to it, and you would have to make use of the stones there in order to carve out these large blocks.
I know too that Judy Rudabush is asking, Wayne, are they relatively at the same elevation, the 3 sites?
Pretty much. I didn't look at my topography map when I was doing this. I was doing GPS coordinates, astrological coordinates, and things like that, and in line of sight. because I wanted to try to get a direction from which they came. And coming east to Lake Michigan, it all fits into place. Whether they came around the north end of Lake Michigan on the west side and crossing a small land bridge, or they came down to St. Lawrence and up, it still makes sense, because at some point the Templars, when they came across these bodies of water, they decided to go further west. And I would have to assume it's probably due to the astrological stars that they were following. And why over the fish symbol you see the astrological sign Pisces, and over the fortress you see the astrological sign Libra, holding the scales of justice.
Yep. Yeah, that's fascinating too. And I know that in what I would like to do now that we have an opportunity, we've been about an hour, a little more than an hour and a half. What I would like to do is start to take some more of the questions from the members, if you don't mind, at this point. And some of them have asked, are you coming back for a part 2? And I would think that, if we have more information to discuss, I'd love to have you come back for a part 2. But let's jump into some of the questions. Again, Judy was asking, Wayne, do you have photographs? You have photographed these carvings at certain astronomical times, equinoxes? That's good. Let's see. Wayne, have you photographed these carvings at certain astronomical times, equinoxes?
Yeah, the winter solstice, the spring, summer would have been pivotal. It's a difficult site to get into, and I don't know, Wayne, if you've been able to get to that yet. We've just scratched the surface there, and I really felt pressed to get this book out. This could have been, a good few years of investigation, and then maybe 2 years of writing. But I wanted to get the introduction to this location out there, and then continue the investigation from there. But Wayne, I don't think you did manage to get there on a solstice.
I think Shauna asked me if I could get there, or maybe it was Alessandra who wanted me to go. And yes, that would be possible, but it's such a difficult slog. You have to remember, we're a mile and a half off the road, and then you got to go another half mile on foot through the woods.
Wow.
And so it's just not like taking a leisurely walk.
Right.
Yeah. If you're going to go and stay there, especially in December, you're going to be there for a while. And then it was cloudy. Very cloudy. So as far as the sun coming through and seeing how the sun laid on the rocks and the projections, it just, at that time, it wasn't physically possible.
Right.
The other thing too, Wayne, is that, and this was terrific that you brought this up. I didn't even think about it myself. So I'm learning a lot here today from you and Shawn as well. But you had said that the trees, the forest would have been very different when the Templars were there. Not at all the way it is today. So there might have been clearer line of sight that if you were to go on the summer solstice, that potentially might not be the same circumstances as they were. And that's where astronomy comes in handy, because it's possible that we could anticipate that with specialized software. I don't have a software program like that. That's not how my mind works either, but we might be able to do that via its location and software. Maybe Tim could help out with that. I don't know. Or
I can't address that right now. The fourth team member, that's kind of up in the air, so we'll have to wait. But as far as a second show, the best is yet to come.
All right. That's fantastic. And I would ask our members, and again, I apologize, members, that many of your questions, because I was so enthralled with what's happening here, I missed many of your questions. Please ask again if you have a question that you'd like to ask. And then we will do our best to get that out there to the team here, Team Templar, and find out their thoughts on it. One question that did come by, and I forget actually who asked it, and it was of you, Gretchen. Your thoughts on the what they've discovered in the show up to this point about the Serpent Mound on the island. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I would like to see more evidence.
Mm-hmm.
My hit is it's Native American. However, a Templar party that wanted to put their stamp on the island, they potentially could have done that. They had the knowledge to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the serpent, of course, is a Christian symbol. Queen Victoria's engagement ring from Albert was a serpent because it was meant at that time as a form of eternity,
Mm-hmm.
of regeneration. So it is a Christian symbol as well. And be ye as wise as serpents. So it's possible. But we sure could use some more information. The carbon dating of the charcoal and the nail found within it, that's wild. Now, was the Serpent Mound there and they decided to camp next to it and had a campsite there, and maybe they were working there? I don't know. So I'd like to see more evidence if they get permission to drill down into that, because it's potentially a heritage site object now.
Right.
Shawn, do you have any ideas on that one, or?
No, not really. I'm starting to tire, unfortunately. So I think, I think there's multiple ways to go about site excavation, and ground scans, various. It'd be nice actually to get a thermal, see what the temperatures are around those rock encroachments. I'm talking about the Wisconsin site now, and actually the Oak Island site, because land temperature also brings into play other interesting geophysical factors, and we should be, bringing everything we can to bear on.
Right. I agree.
looking at, trying to work out what's happening, and rather than approach it from just in a linear fashion, which, again, like Gretchen said earlier, I've got, a lot, obviously loads of respect for, but let's bring in some other skills to have a truly team effort in so many ways.
Yep, and that's exactly what they're doing on Oak Island. If you've watched the show from the beginning, from season 1, when it was just 6 people on the island starting to walk around and drill some holes in the ground and trying to find out where the money pit was, to now they have such an extensive team of people working there. That's exactly right. What you're saying is exactly right. You bring in the expertise, which you guys have done here, looking at it in different angles and coming up with more answers to the questions that keep cropping up every single day. So it's advantageous to bring in more people and more expertise, as you say. Yep. There's another question on here for Gretchen. It says, this is from Pam Block, do you think that the square hole in the Templar cross that Rick and Gary found represents a portal to heaven? What does that mean? I hadn't thought of that. So, yeah.
It looking at both sides of that cross, if you're lucky enough to see pictures of both sides, it looks like it was poured into a mold. It's the only way it could have gotten that detail of that hand that goes down the.
I talked about that hand.
It's very detailed, and it's very deceptive, very simplistic looking, because the metal is humble, but it is a skillful piece. It is at an angle. I like the way the ridge is raised at that squared juncture. So obviously there's purpose to it. And if you equate that to a human being, yeah, sure, that's quite a terrific idea or way of thinking about that. Because it's, in some cultures, the term meditation is used. In European culture, the term prayer is used, active prayer, which is where you engage your body in emotions into your effort, your what you want your intention and your outcome to be. So there are methods how to train your body and do that. Some people use drums and singing and walking a labyrinth. Labyrinths were as Chartres labyrinth. So there are these physical ways one can train the mind, and physical objects such as the lead cross, which is the star of this show, as far as I'm concerned, and the Templars were multifaceted. Everything was sacred, but everything had a practical purpose. So I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, somebody mentioned too about the Illuminati, and I don't know anything. I heard about that when I watched the was it Angels and Demons, or one of the two that Tom Hanks, one of the movies that Tom Hanks was involved in. The Illuminati.
Well, that's
I have no idea what they are.
Okay, that's a tough one.
Is that a long subject for another time, maybe?
Yes, and I think there's an awful lot of misconception out there. Hitler swept through Europe, and he arrested the Freemasons in Europe. But there were about 2 million of them. These individuals that died were judiciary, doctors, lawyers, anybody who was middle, class, educated, whatever, that could have launched an intellectual stop against him. So he got rid of them, and they wore a red triangle. And then alongside that, he persecuted people with disabilities. And after he had taken care of the Freemasons, he then went after the Jewish population. Pretty much the same thing that King Philip did, only in reverse. Philip went after the Jewish population, took their wealth, kicked them out of his kingdom in 1306. Then he turned his eyes on the Templars, did the same thing. But so Hitler at the time, used a lot of propaganda. What you got to do is get people to believe that the people you're dealing with are subhuman. They're not truly human. And this plays into the reptilian alien thing. Now, I'm not going to get into that, but there are a lot of ways to dehumanize a population base. And that propaganda that Hitler started against the Freemasons at that time got rolled forward, and we're still dealing with that ghost today. Now, that's not to say that there aren't bad guys in any organization. There are.
Oh, absolutely.
But the Freemasons did a lot of charitable work. The Freemason hospitals all over the place. They've become, a thing of the past now because we have a different hospital system now, but they had hospitals all over the place, and libraries, philanthropic deeds because philanthropic deeds are a pillar of Freemasonry. So this is just really quickly, my overall feeling on that, the Illuminati is a big, big subject. Lots of hairs in there. But if you look at it this way, you only follow the money. And if you follow the money, you're looking at the 1% of the population base in the world right now that has control of the majority of resources and money. And you'll find that in that, it's not just a certain segment of nobility out of Europe. It's Chinese. There are more billionaires and millionaires in India than just about anywhere else. So we got to shift our thinking on all this. Look for the money, as Wayne will probably say. If you follow the money, you'll find perpetrators. And we do need to shore up and make the banking system in America more equitable, because they get away with an awful lot. So that's the long and the short of it, and with a lot in between.
Well, we'll have to have you back on for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wayne.
With respect to Shawn and
yes.
And I know it's getting late because we got to remember he's on a different time zone than we are.
No, it's got to be getting late
and
or night.
And because there's so much more to this, and I'm going to allow Shawn the courtesy to say if he wants to go on to continue.
Well, I think what we could do at this point, I was actually thinking about maybe starting to wrap it up a little bit here, and I'd love to have you guys back on. But go ahead, Shawn. What's your thoughts?
Don't let me stop you guys. I was just thinking about getting a glass of whiskey. That's all. So, It's no. I'm okay. We can continue. There's no problem with that. Just one point that I was on my mind was the lead cross.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often those crosses, with it being a softer alloy metal, the Anglo-Saxons and various other ancient cultures would actually, if they were going to create a bronze spearhead, would actually make the mold from stone. They would carve it into the stone and then fill the mold with molten bronze, wait for it to cure, and then finish the spearhead off. And I just, I'm thinking that's probably how they must have had a master mold, obviously, for that variety of lead cross with, that curious hand arrangement, an arm that sort of cuts across it, which could be carved into stone, reasonably delicately. So that was just a sort of a point really about that before I get too tired to think about it. But yeah, no, fascinating stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And it does look like that cross was poured into something. I think Gretchen, you even mentioned that as well, because if you look at the back side of it, when they're holding it, it has more of a flat, as if it was poured, and that would have been, the back would have actually been on top when they poured it. And then the actual, and I noticed that early on, and I had said something about that, that hand, it looks like there's a hand coming down to the bottom of the cross. And I just brought that up in our show last week about that very thing, because we were talking about Aaron Helton's theory that, that Zena Helton's map has been pointing to the treasure the whole time at the cone E, which is the bottom of Nolan's cross. And I had made the comment that, yeah, that hand is not coming down to the bottom of the cross and it's saying, dig here. It's telling you, dig here. So I don't know. I know that's not why it's there, but it just, it just rang funny to me, that particular thing. But again, it does look like it was poured. And that's very interesting that you brought that up, because I had forgotten about that very thing. And that's a simple way that they had forged metal, was to pour the molten metal into something that they've carved into a piece of rock. And I love your insight on that. I absolutely do.
That's I mean, one thing that possibly to get a bit more to grips with the the technique, it could be, we could make a bigger version of that cross, reversed, carved out, to create like a big version of the cross, so that we can analyze it on a bigger scale, so to speak, because I think that would be useful as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think it said Judy Rudebush again was saying, in many Rosy Rosy group pictures, you see the hand of God reaching down to earth. Wow. Very interesting. I had not thought about that either. I
never thought of that. No, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. Thank you, Judy. And she's a wealth of knowledge. I tell you, we got to get her to come on the show, obviously, too. I think we're going to go ahead and start to wrap it up here, because of the fact that we have been on for a while now. And I know that 2 hours gets to be a little bit of a limit, because that's kind of everybody's attention span and getting tired and things of that nature, too. So, but I would love to start to wrap it up, and I get final thoughts from you guys on today's show. And again, if you would like to come back, I would absolutely love to have you come back. We could wait, do it again soon, or we could wait until you get a little bit more, information for us. But I know this is the wrong time of year to be going out and exploring for Wayne out there. I don't know how much snow you may have on the ground right now out in that area, if you have any at all, but obviously it makes it tough to be able to get any more exploring done in the winter months. But this has been fantastic. Do you have
we'd like to come back probably in a couple of weeks, if everybody can do that, because we would really love for you to see, and your viewers to see, what's inside that cave.
I would love that.
And get Shawn's impression. Okay. And while the weather is a determinative factor right now, sorry guys, I'm not going out there and crawling around in that cave when it's this cold. I can save that for another time. So the team can decide on get a hold of you and set a date, and that way your viewers can come in and see some unbelievable markings. And I'll just throw this tidbit out there for your viewers. There's 3 crosses inside that cave.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know I'm very interested in seeing that. I'm watching the chat go by, and everybody's saying the same thing, that Team Templar, you got to come back. Appreciate your time on this subject, and everybody's talking about Team Templar now. So that's what you guys have been dubbed. You dubbed that yourselves, and now that's sticking because I think it's a great name. And they just think it's awesome to do that. So, or to have that name and to come back, and I can't wait to see it. Quite honestly, I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you. And then Team Templar, we're humbled by all you've done for us.
Oh no, it's our honor to have you here. It really is. And I know that Gretchen and I have had the opportunity, and I've had the honor to talk to her before and get a lot of her expertise on the Templar Knights. Oh man, it's just a fountain of knowledge, and I just appreciate that so much. And now to meet you, Wayne, and you, Shawn, and to know that Shawn, I guess I've seen some of the pictures that you kind of rub elbows with some royalty over there, so that's fantastic. Yes. So that's to say that I have actually spoken with somebody who has runs in those circles from time to time, and also the Sinclairs. Just that part there too just fascinates me. That's like royalty in my mind. That's just fascinating.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of knew them all, but my main mentor really was Andrew, who wrote The Sword and the Grail, Rosslyn, The Secret Scroll, and but it was actually my father in Canada that gave me my first copy of his book, The Sword and the Grail. And in it, he said, "Seek this man out," and I did. And I met him at the Clan Sinclair gathering in 2000. I think it was 2001 in north of Scotland. And the rest's history. We kind of formed this alliance, as the Sinclairs and Guns had done in previous lives to some extent. So it was fascinating, and all these different paths, and that I've wandered over the times and years. So all sort of coming back now to Wayne's site at Wisconsin, and lucky to connect with Gretchen as well, and all this joint knowledge, and it's going to expand. I'm sure other people are going to come in to help us. We're on the path. For me, it's unfinished business.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And we want to be a part of that, what you gain when you continue this business, because I know that many people, we've got some fascinated people, and something I'd like to, or people that are fascinated by what you've talked about here today, but something I'd like to ask you to do also, and I ask this of all of our guests that we have on, is this particular broadcast that we're doing today is available on YouTube. It's also available on our group page, the Quest of Oak Island and Beyond on Facebook, that I believe all you are a member of. What I'd like you to do when you have time is to go back over, because there's now 251 comments that have been made while we've been speaking tonight or today. And what I'd like you to do when you have the opportunity is to kind of go back through and look at some of the members' comments that they have made and see if you can help answer some things. Because I know I've missed so much that the things were just scrolling by as we were talking. And I know that we've missed so much, and it's absolutely fascinating and wonderful when our guests get an opportunity to go back and read some of that, and you can respond after the fact and kind of answer some of their questions. And I know that's great, and I appreciate it so much, and I know they will too. So if you have that opportunity, please do that. And again, I'd love to have you back. I do have an opening in 2 weeks, same time, same channel, 2 weeks from now. If and I know, but you have schedules that you have to work around, and we will talk about that as we go forward. But we'd love to have you come back and continue this. And I want to see those carvings that are inside that cave. Oh my goodness, I can't wait to see that.
Keep that date open. We'll firm it up.
Okay, sounds great. And for you members out there, thank you so much for being here today. And then we try to do this at a time, and we'll continue this on our Saturday shows to try to do it at a time when some of our friends from across the pond, so to speak, can also join us because of the time difference. And thank you so much for Shawn for staying up and being here with us during this time as well. And that's why we want to do it this early in the day, to give you an opportunity to join us. Those of you that are out there across the way. So I see so much. It's still, the comments are still going by. It's great to see that, and it's great to again, like I said, to have you guys on board. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up and say thank you. And we will definitely be reaching out to you again, and to our members. We'll let you know exactly when we can have them back on to continue this and get us those pictures. So for now, I'm going to say good night or good day to those of you, except Shawn. Good night. And you guys can stick around for a minute. We'll kind of wrap up after we log off here. But again, thank you so much for all of our members. You are why we're doing this. And to have our guest on to be able to share this information is fantastic. And I know that we'll continue on. So thanks again. And we'll call this a day.